And we see there's almost like this split in reality and consciousness in the species right now, is what it feels like, because we're seeing some people who are so staunchly, passionately, and wholeheartedly about natural everything, real, authentic, genuine everything, from art to aging, right? From writing and creation to cooking, like real food, like experiences that are in the natural world. And then there's the like plasticized magic bullet everything. And there's a fine line here. This is the Embodied Podcast, and I'm your host, Elizabeth Cialto, here to deliver equal parts refuge, revelation, and real talk as we navigate the blissful and excruciating, or as I like to call it, blisscruciating paradoxes of midlife and being human. Enjoy! Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode number 461 of the Embodied Podcast. It's funny, the show is a continuation of something I began 11 years ago. 2015. And the original show, some of you know this because you've been around the whole entire time, but the original show was not intended to be a podcast. Back then, there was a platform called Entheos that was a platform essentially for summits and symposiums. So they would bring in people to create these series of interviews where they would interview, like 20 to 30 people. And so the original first, I think it was like 24, 25 episodes of this show were actually they were for Entheos. I didn't record them as a podcast. But shortly after my symposium went live on Entheos, they went out of business. They stopped doing what they were doing. And I always thought this was so beautiful and so generous, which was they were like, hey, we're going out of business, but please have what you created and do whatever you want with it. And, it's funny because 11 years later, looking at the landscape of the online world and, content creation and all these things, that's why it strikes me as so generous. It really was just the right thing to do because promises were made that weren't going to be kept. And, I get that because I also, last year, actually, at the end of 2024, I had created a container called Misbehaving. It was going to be a 6-month experience. And about 3 months in, I was like, y'all, I can't do this anymore. I can't force myself across the finish line for this. And so I gave everyone instead, I wasn't in a position financially to give people refunds, which obviously would have been a lovely option, but I couldn't do that. And so I gave everyone a credit. I still want to give you content. So I'm going to give you a couple things. I recorded a couple things. And then I just gave people a credit for the remaining balance of what they weren't going to receive through the program for whatever else they wanted. Some people used it on readings. Some people used it on other offerings I made. And, we live in this world where a lot of people move in a way of no consequences. And what this is the radical individualism working its way through so many decisions that people make when they run businesses. But when you're more rooted in relationality, there are certain things that, like some people, I had a friend many years ago who had hired a company to help her self-publish a book. And in her process, while she was right in the middle, hadn't published the book yet, they went out of business and they just disappeared. She had invested a really insane amount of money, like 5 figures, like, I don't know, 25, 50 grand or something like that, maybe even more. She had hired a developmental editor and all that. She was in this whole process, had a cover design, just so much was done. They went out of business and they literally just disappeared off the face of the earth. So her book was unfinished. The team that she had already paid, she relied on, whatever, done. And she was left high and dry. And I'm not friends with her anymore. So I don't know what ended up happening with that, if she ever published her book. But that's the kind of way a lot of people roll. So, people who actually care about the humans who are giving the money and aren't just trying to get the money and get the hell out of here, you figure out some kind of exchange, some kind of reciprocity. And it's just, man, in these industries, in these spaces, what things have exploded and expanded into, and that people just don't care. it's always been so foreign and it's always been so weird to me, and you see people talking about bring back shame, like bring back consequences. And it's like for real. But, one of the things I used to get so pissed about that stuff. I used to get pissed about it. I used to feel like I needed to talk about it and call it out, blah, 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 all these things. And, at a certain point, I just had to realize how energetically expensive that was for me to be so involved and care so much about what other people were doing, how shitty other people were being, and instead just be like, honestly, one of the most powerful things they can ever do is just not be that way. And, as funny and weird and perhaps ironic or paradoxical it is that people can move that way and experience no tangible consequences that people on the outside can discern. There's also consequences for moving in this kind of world that rewards that radical individualism and that kind of behavior and, whatever. There are consequences for having integrity. Like the way you get shunned and rejected and locked out of things, disinvited. My life has been a series of disinvitations for like the last 9 or 10 years. And I was going to say it's humbling. It's not humbling, it's sobering. What it is sobering. And I was just this morning thinking about how earned wisdom does require time and does require age. When I was younger, I've always, since my early 30s, even had clients who were, 10, 15, even 20 plus years older than me. And I remember at that time, especially when I was in my earlier 30s, wondering like, why are these people listening to me? Why are these people coming to me? And, I've had many people reflect to me over the years, like, you're an old soul. We could tell, we could feel it. And like, sure, that might be true. But crossing the threshold of 40 and actually getting into midlife, I'll be 43 in a couple of months. I just realized even then, no matter how much of an old soul I ever was, there's wisdom I just didn't have yet because I hadn't lived through certain experiences. I hadn't worked through certain wounds. I hadn't yet gone through certain initiations. But in those years, I also had a friend who once had said to me, your purity is your protection. Because when you are a person of integrity and you're existing in these industries where integrity is often distorted or hard to come by, hard to find, it can feel not even just ostracizing, but it can feel so it's just hard. It's just hard. And it can begin to feel almost like not as dramatic as to say you're cursed or shunned, but really it could feel like there's a barrier or a blockade because you're not conforming. And that's really what it is. When you refuse to conform, you are systematically shut out. And shut out is kind of like the most minor, mild expression of what some people experience to a much larger and intense degree. And what had me thinking about this, which and it's so relevant for being like the second part of this episode. I was actually going to record this last week and I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to record it. I was like, not yet. Like something's not clicked into place yet. And what that thing was is I went last week to see the Michael Jackson movie. And I had to first see it and then like give myself like a couple of days to simmer on it, be with it. There was some grieving. There's just so much. And whether you've seen the movie or not, one of the things that I'm loving about and really appreciating about the timing of it is we're now getting to see all these clips, all this footage of Michael Jackson from back in the day that, those of us who are geriatric millennials, even regular younger millennials, all the way on up to like Gen X, and of course anything older than that, we know what it was like when unless you saw something on TV when it happened, you didn't see it, right? There wasn't YouTube, there wasn't social media, nobody was sharing clips of stuff. Like maybe you'd see it in like VH1 and MTV or the E channel. I don't even know if the E channel still exists, like where they would show highlights or those shows like my parents used to watch Entertainment Tonight. And I think there's one now called Access Hollywood, right? Those kinds of shows. That would be your only chance to see things that had happened after the fact if it wasn't televised. Oh my goodness. So we're seeing all these clips now. And, on the other side of so many of my own experiences of being a healer, working with folks, doing my own healing work, neurodivergence, which I know I spoke a bit about in the last episode, I'm watching this Michael movie and I'm watching all these clips and I'm like, oh my goodness, this was such a gentle but also a stunted person whose whole entire childhood, not only was it taken away because he grew up in the spotlight from the age of like 5 or something like that, but it was abused. He was abused. And, people knew these things. But I don't think to the extent that this movie has portrayed, like just a few minutes in, I'm like, oh my God, he was like severely and intensely autistic. That is just so clear. But back then, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s plus even, right? People the stigma around those things, the lack of information and understanding in the general population. Of course, there's always been like specialists and things like that, people who understood and knew it. But I even remember being a kid in school, right? And there was special ed or there were special needs kids in classes. And it was really stigmatized, really not understood. And not to mention back then, we still threw around like words like the R word. And, we would call people names, so all of that was just really landing for me in a way and just such a reminder that one of my favorite quotes that I actually got from a series of books about the Magdalene Line trilogy by a woman named Kathleen McGowan is for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. And this is one of the wisdoms that age brings us. The more time that we spend on this earth, engaging with our day-to-day reality in our relationships and our life circumstances, whatever it is that you do professionally or not, whatever is your family, your community, where you live, your environment, your culture, the things that shape you and the things that you interact and engage with in the day-to-day. These things just if you're navigating life consciously, right? Like if you're aware, if you're awake, if you're paying attention, you just learn some shit. You begin to and you come to a deeper understanding via the exposure alone that we just don't have when we're younger. And it's not to say that young people offer no value, which is not true. One of the things that I love about being back in New York is the library system just puts on the most incredible events. So there's just been some things and some lectures and some classes and some groups and things that I've gone to for free through the library, which is another miracle, right? In 2026, for anything to be free. And one of them, I couldn't even believe this was a thing. I was so excited. Was a discussion series of some of Audre Lorde's most popular essays. And the first one in the series was my very favorite essay, which is Uses of the Erotic as Power. And the woman who led it was Gen Z. She was young. She was like 23, 24, something like that. And most of the people in the room were Gen Z. I was the oldest person there. And I left. I don't have a lot of interaction. I don't have a lot of Gen Z folks in my life. I just see like all the derogatory things that people post and comment and criticize about Gen Z online. But I was like, these young people are incredible. They have a depth of an understanding and wisdom and awareness of things. When I was their age, I was binge drinking on weekends, hustling, like just trying to make it in life in a way that was still possible. I was in stupid relationships with men that were not for me. I was just so proud of them. I really am in my auntie years. I was like, oh my God, I love these kids. And they're not kids, they're young adults. But, when you're older, you feel like young people are kids. I was just so proud of them. I was learning, I was listening. I was like, yes. It was such a beautiful experience. So, aging is such a privilege, it's such a gift. And one of the things I'm excited, to bring this show back firmly in midlife now and be able to share and explore and inquire and be curious and have conversations with people from that place. So let's see what else. I always have my notes here so I don't go off on tangents. So, in part one, this is part two. In part one, I talked a lot about the last few years, moving back to New York. I talked about neurodivergence, dissolving identities, some ancestral healing, recalibrating my relationship to work and ambition and business and creativity. And so in this one, I really want to talk more about what's emerging now. And it's just like the tip of the iceberg, right? Because I could tell you what's emerging, but then what's going to happen in real time as I have more conversations with people, as I pop in for solo episodes. And I can't remember if I mentioned in the first one that the podcast that I had in the in between, since I retired this with my friend Alicia, is called Mystical Aunties. And we started out doing weekly episodes, and then we moved to 2 a week. And then now that Embodied is back, there will be a monthly Mystical Aunties episode here on Embodied, where so everything could just all live in one place. So Alicia and I, those of you that have listened to Mystical Aunties, I know some of you are probably here because you listened to Mystical Aunties. So thank you for coming along over to Embodied. But Mystical Aunties is not over. We're going to keep doing that. And it's so beautiful and amazing. And Alicia is a little bit older than me. And I just love midlife. I love this so much. There's a meme that's been floating around for years that says something to the effect of, I know I'm supposed to like feel bad about it, but I love aging so much. And it's so true, especially for women, right? And we see there's almost like this split in reality and consciousness in the species right now, is what it feels like, because we're seeing some people who are so staunchly, passionately, and wholeheartedly about natural everything, real, authentic, genuine everything, from art to aging, right? From writing and creation to cooking, like real food, like experiences that are in the natural world. And then there's the like plasticized magic bullet everything. And there's a fine line here, because I'm going to bring up things like Ozempic, right? The GLP-1s, the semaglutides, and the shift that we're seeing back to what in the 90s was called heroin chic, but now it's like the Ozempic era. I have some dear friends who went on GLP-1s for legitimate health reasons, not, and when I say legitimate health reasons, I just mean they didn't go on solely to lose weight for aesthetic reasons, okay? And it's changed their lives. People with autoimmune disorders, inflammation issues, it's changed their life. Aches and pains and thyroids and this and that, like so many things. It's been miraculous for them. Beautiful. And then, but what we see rampantly online is the people who have just done it to get skinny. And while it's so amazing, I want folks always to do what feels right and best to them, right? This is a bodily autonomy conversation. If you're going to be pro-choice, you got to be pro everything else. You got to be pro let people do whatever they want with or to their bodies, because it's personal choice. You might not agree with it, but I'm always going to be on team pro bodily autonomy. I deeply, deeply believe in that. And again, while so many people make choices I personally wouldn't make for or on or about myself, or truly your body, your choice. But it is alarming. Just this past week, there was an image of Demi Moore, who's like skin and bone now. And you could see her arms, and the headline, the thing that's been going around is about like Demi's toned arms. And the thing is, like, are they toned, or are they emaciated so we see her muscles? And that's what the debate is. That's what the question is. And we all, those of us again of a certain age, remember G.I. Jane. We remember what a ripped, super fit, toned Demi Moore looked like, right? And again, she was younger, but there's plenty of older folks who were not emaciated and toned. And again, it's not a criticism on personal choice, but it is an invitation always to pay attention to what's the real messaging here? Like, what are we pedestalizing? What are we encouraging people to long for, to prioritize, to go after? And it's cool to see this kind of split happening, where it feels like more and more people are really for the natural way, and like the plastic, the aesthetically ozempified everything. It's almost like a split consciousness, a split reality, like we're witnessing different factions of the species branch off and take different evolutionary or de-evolutionary paths. And it's just interesting. It's an interesting and very wild time to be here, to be alive, to be observing, to be engaging, and to be making choices every single day based on who we are, how we're built, what we have access to, what we don't, the absence and the presence of various resources, there's a lot to be mindful about. And I say mindful, we don't need to be obsessed with anything. We don't need to be distracting ourselves, but it's such hard work to be present with everything and to have the diligence and the discernment and the devotion to not overconsume it, right? To binge on things that are just not good for our spirits, right? Which it's not good for the spirit, it's not good for the body, it's not good for the mind, it's not good for the health. Like everything it's interconnected. I'm an embodiment person, first and foremost, and deep and always. And so the interconnectedness of all things is embodiment 101. Everything's connected, everything's related, as well as the relationality of everything, prioritizing kinship, relationship, connection. And it's not even as specific or stringent perhaps as collectivism, but it's literally just remembering that you're here on a planet and with other people, with other people who are different from you. It's just fucking be human, yo. Like, and I think that's one of the things that's so alarming about the replastification or the deepening plastification or the ozempification of so many things is it's engineering instead of just living and allowing. Oh my goodness. It's so, again, so there's so many big questions. There's so many big questions to live into and feel into and observe and decide and navigate in this age. So that's really when I in the introduction, when I say the blissful and excruciating paradoxes of midlife, it's really the bliss excruciating paradoxes of current existence, humanity. So this feels connected, related. One of the things that is emerging in a big way for me, again, after being in this world, this online world, this online entrepreneur, being a business owner, like all these things, girl boss, this, that, whatever the fuck people are calling it, want to call it, have called it, is just losing any and all, I'm going to call it artificial desire. For many years, as part of my wild soul liberation framework, I've talked about the difference between ego desires and soul's desires, but there's a new category that feels correct and that it should be named, which is artificial desire. That is just like it's like a junk food desire. If soul's desires are like ultimate gourmet and ego's desires are like fast food, maybe the junkiest of the junk is artificial stuff. Because even fast food is still comprised of like real food, some of it. But just like the junkiest of junk, of engineered, not real anything, barely a real ingredient to be found. That's like the artificial desire. That's the stuff that's just been, I want to almost say, like implanted into us via God, so much media influence, marketing, my goodness. But I've just lost so much, released so much of the ego and artificial types of desires, because none of us are above that. Like we all have that shit. We live here. If you engage, unless you're just like your whole life, if you were raised like reclusive and just never engaged with any kind of like media, entertainment, marketing, which I'm sure people like that must exist somewhere, right? Very, very, very hard to do, I think, in the United States. But we all have some of that. I no longer have any desire to like be anyone, meaning be anyone like significantly regarded, culturally or in any specific community or in any specific way. And one of the reasons for that is, as a person who's moved around a lot and lived in major cities and major cities that are hubs for a lot of celebrities, specifically New York and LA, and a lot of authors. I don't even know if people are using the word thought leader anymore. I've engaged with some celebrities here and there, like entertainment industry celebrities. I don't have a lot of people like that in my life. I certainly don't have any close personal friends who are celebrities. What I've had a lot more personal exposure to are like athletes, authors, people who are those kinds of like celebrity. But what I am is just 1 degree of separation from some of the most famous people in the world. And I have close personal friends who are connected to those types of people. And it's just so interesting. And that's not like we're not like name dropping. There's no humble bragging or anything like that happening here. That's why I said geographically, like when you live in proximity to this kind of stuff, you're going to experience it, right? There's nothing like fucking special about me. Like, oh, I know all these people because I'm me. It's like, no, I know of and am connected and related or like very close proximity to all these kinds of people because I lived a good chunk of my life in Los Angeles and New York City. Okay. Not special for me. But you hear the real. You hear the real about that. You hear about like the different details and aspects of people's lives that you're like, damn, I would never want that. But it's easy. It's so seductive, right? I watch so many people chase that kind of like fame or proximity to fame, right? All the people, God, when I was first coming up in these kind of like overlapping industries, again, I'll just call it like the girl boss world. Everyone wanted to be the next Oprah. Everyone wanted to be the fucking next Oprah. It's so funny. And then, now there's also things we know about Oprah that's like, well, damn, you just can't become that famous or that wealthy without fucking losing some soul in the process. But I bring that up to say that this has been one of the biggest gifts of the last several years is like losing that desire to like be anyone, to like be significant in any way, but at the same time, keep the sole desire of using my gifts. One of my biggest gifts has always been my voice. That's why a podcast for me was always one of the most successful things I ever did because it was just very natural for me. I remember many years ago, it was 2017, I spoke at a podcasting conference. And that was the first time I'd had my show for like 2 years and some change at that point, and it had done very well, stats-wise, again, which back then was just easier because there were so fewer podcasts and it wasn't super saturated yet. But I had kind of just always done my own thing. And like I mentioned earlier, I originally didn't even set out to create a podcast. I just had 25 interviews and I was like, all right, cool. I guess I'll make this podcast from that other Entheos thing. And when I was there, I realized how much, thought, effort, process, strategy, learning so many podcasters had put into it. And I was like, well, damn, I've kind of just been winging it and doing whatever I wanted, which was very affirming to be like, I can trust myself. I can trust my instincts. I don't have to, and I'm not going to do all this, like, bless. And I'm not hating on it either. I'm just saying like that wasn't my path. And for those of you who geek out on things like human design, as a 6'2" person, natural is part of who I am, right? Things that come naturally to me have just always gone better than things I've ever tried to like engineer or conform to or do in a way that somebody else recommended. So anyway, I just remember meeting so many people at that conference that were trying so hard. And there's nothing wrong with trying. There's nothing wrong with effort, but the fucking everything out here in this world that has people hustling so hard to be all kinds of things that they are not and do all kinds of things that they're genuinely not built for and either don't have the skills, the capacity, the talent, the stamina, the desire for is I think that's one of the great injustices of the world because then we're missing out on what people are meant for. So we'll talk about that's one of the reasons why I love speaking to. Back when I first started this show, I was speaking to a lot of folks about a lot of spirituality related things. And at that time, that's really what I was still deeply exploring and integrating. That is not what I'm deeply exploring and integrating anymore. And we'll still talk about those types of things on the show moving forward, but from just such a different place. But one of the things that I have found over the years that I love is that artists, creators, culture shaping people, those who really are tuning in, tapping into what's within them and creating things from that place, not to be dubbed a creator or a content creator, because literally it's like, I remember my friend Rochelle put it this way one time. It's like the thing you can't not do, which, coming back to the show, it's funny, right? Like I really thought I had retired this thing for good. And I was like, nah, mommy, you just needed a break. You needed a break. You needed to do some intensive recalibrating and then come back and be able to do it just more attuned, more aligned, more grounded, focused, steady in my own self and not I was just in such a deep, deep, deep process of my own over the last few years, which some people would probably call it like a dark night of the soul, which is also funny to me because you could be in a dark night and still be like bright and light and experiencing like humans are so multifaceted and multi-layered. Life is so fucking dynamic. It's wild. But I needed space. It's kind of similar to back from like 2015 to 2017, and some of you listening probably attended these. I did, man, I don't remember how many it was at this point. Maybe it was like 15, 17, 19, or something like that. I used to do these Untame Yourself healing weekends. And at a certain point when I stopped, it's because I had gone into such a deep healing process of my own that I knew I wasn't going to be able to do my own work and hold that kind of space for other people at the same time. Like I knew I needed that capacity for myself. And so it kind of feels similarly with the show because, since I decided to bring it back, I also, in those 2 years, as I was doing just like so much of my own processing and whatever, I just didn't really feel like I had anything to say. Like, not in the way that I had consistently for 9 years. But now it's like I'll be driving, things are just flooding back in, right? My notes, I use a couple different apps to make notes about things I want to do on episodes or people I want to invite or conversations I want to have or ideas or whatever. And it's just freaking flooding. So it's cool. It's almost like they turned the faucet off for me for a little while so I could do like tend to myself and my life and just reorganize and recalibrate and reorient some things. And then they're like, okay, you're good now. Whoosh, turn the faucet back on. And, the fire hose is back. So I share all these things because I never share my own personal experiences from a place of believing what I experience is universal. I share because typically my work attracts people who have the awareness and the capacity and the pattern recognition, for lack of a better way of putting it, to extrapolate what resonates for them, what is meaningful and significant or even valuable for them from anything I share personally. And I've probably talked about this before, but I remember when the pandemic first hit in 2020, I started doing some sessions with a mentor and elder teacher of a dear friend of mine that my friend had recommended. And she was in her 80s. And this was so, because one of the things I've always craved most in my life has been elder mentorship. I don't have it in my family, certainly. It's just not something I really had. So I was so excited to work with like an 80-year-old medicine person. And we would get on the phone and we would have these conversations. And I would show up with all these questions because I was used to having coaches, right? And I would show up with all these questions. And the whole like hour would come and go. I barely ask any of my questions. And I'm going to put this in quotes. If you're listening to this, I'm doing air quotes when I say all that would have happened is she would have told me a couple of stories and maybe asked me a few things. And I remember after a couple of those calls being like agitated, like, my God, I have all these things I need to know and work on and ask. And there's no space for that. Like, what's the point of this? But what would also happen is I would think about the stories and I would reflect and I'd be like, oh my God, it's like she answered my question without even knowing what it was. And I really allowed that to inform how I roll too, which is there's a level in which I was kind of always doing that because again, it's relational. It's very, for some folks, indigenous, right? Like oral tradition, word of mouth, sitting around the fire, exchanging stories, myths, tales, living your own mythology, right? Observing the mythology that's emerging around you at all times, the themes, the archetypes. So I know some people might be like, "Ah, she talks about herself so much." It's like, it's more than that, y'all. It's much more than that. We got to share our stories. We got to share our experiences. And listen, there's just absolutely why go through pain, trials, tribulations, hardships, deeply challenging shit and initiations, if not to come out on the other side that you could possibly share with others that might be able to help them. I think one of the most devastating positions that people take in these modern times, or it's probably not modern at all, but modern context, is if I had to go through something, you should have to too. Like I remember a couple years back when Joe Biden was still president and they were talking about student loan forgiveness. And I remember remember seeing a post somewhere like, I had to pay mine, they should have to pay theirs. And I'm like, what? I just can't imagine being oriented like that, because I'm like, if me having to go through anything and talk about it could prevent anyone else from not having to have that fucking experience, like, nothing would make me happier. Nothing would make me happier. Who wants other people to suffer? Right? Like, why? Why? I can understand it, like, psychologically from a trauma informed, like, I get it, but also I'll never fucking get it at the same time. So that's not how we roll here. It's never going to be how we roll. So yeah, that driver of just losing that desire to like be anyone, have a platform or whatever, but then to still be like, but I'm still going to do what I'm here to do. And so I might have a platform, like here I am, right? With a podcast, YouTube, whatever. But it's going to be whatever it's meant to be without me like striving for some shit that is not mine to be ambitious about or want or desire. So there's so much more to come, everybody. I hope these two little welcome back. Let's get reacquainted. I'm sure some of you are also new. Welcome. You're coming in at a beautiful time to the wild soul, the embodied world, the whatever it is that I'm calling what I do these days. But always, always, always comes from the depths of my heart and my soul. So thank you so much. If you enjoyed the episode, of course, subscribe, share, like, leave a comment, review, wherever you're listening, whatever's going on. And there's just so much more where this came from. And next week we dive back into interviews, which are going to be so juicy, delicious, exciting, interesting, fun, exploratory, rooted in curiosity. So I hope you'll be back. Everybody, thank you so much once again for tuning into the Embodied Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please show us some love. Like, subscribe, share, sign up for something, tell a friend. Whatever you feel compelled to do, we appreciate it. If you're listening on a podcast platform, go ahead and leave us a review. And that's it. We'll see you next time.